It was late on a Thursday evening. Theatres had just finished their elective list. I was halfway down the corridor, assisting the theatre porters with their last transfers from recovery. And one of the relatives on the journey turned to the theatre porter who was at the foot of the bed and asked him some question. He responded, "I'm not sure, I'm only a porter." And right there in front of everyone, I said out loud, "You are not only a porter. You are not only a porter. You are a porter." Never ever say that. Never say I'm only a porter. Never ever ever. And don't tolerate it from anyone else saying that either. It's a bad choice of words that has to be avoided at all costs because it's. Hospital porters' pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV, and welcome to this. Probably one of the hottest St Theo's days I think I've ever known. Yeah, I mean, if you remember last year's St Theo's Day, I'll put a link in the description box of that video. That particular St Theo's Day was very wet. I remember it was wet and miserable, and I was on the bus and the windows were all steamed up and things like that. Well, this St Theo's Day is pretty different to that, I think you'll agree. It's totally and utterly different. But anyway, it is June the 1st. It's the start of a new hospital portering year. Wonder how different it will be to the last one, I don't know. But anyway, June the 1st, 2020. June the 1st, feast day of St Theobald of Ruggiero. He was born in 1170 in Piedmont, Italy, and made a name for himself carrying sick people into the hospital in local towns. So as a result, he has become the patron saint of hospital porters. And so every June the 1st I celebrate the feast day of my noble profession. But it's a sad one. This particular St Thursday is very, very sad because we have lost, as far as I know, 3 hospital porters so far in the COVID-19 pandemic. This is along with a huge number of civilian staff as well, who I'm also very sad about. In fact, I'll put a link in the description box to my HPANWO radio show all about that. But the 3 porters I wish to dedicate this HPANWO TV production to: Oscar King, Albert Rico and Brian Darlington. 3 hospital porters, 2 of them at my hospital, the John Radcliffe. Pride and dignity, brother porters, may you rest in peace. So of course the COVID-19 situation has changed everything. This St Theo's Day is obviously going to be different. What you see behind you there is the Churchill Hospital. This hospital, I think I filmed here before. I think you've seen it before because I filmed in this little field before. This filmed beside the Churchill Hospital behind me. But basically we're kind of on the Groom Lake Road of the Churchill. It's as close as you can get to the Churchill Hospital, and you can't actually go in it because it's a no-go zone. The hospital itself, hospitals are always no-go zones unless you've got some purpose for being there, either as a patient, visitor, etc., etc. But that is now more and more strictly enforced. I remember after my discharge in 2012, I made a video called Ben the Civilian, and I sat as close as you can get to the John Radcliffe without going in there. I feel it very strange. I'll try and speak up in case the wind is disturbing the microphone right now. I found it very, very strange. It was a strange and disturbing feeling that I could not enter the hospital where I served diligently for 23 years. This is being enforced even more now with the COVID-19 pandemic lockdown. Really, basically, if I was to step over that little bridge crossing the stream there, I'd be immediately arrested and charged and fined $600. No, I wouldn't. It's not quite that bad. It's not like the Camu dudes. But hospitals now are pretty much isolated places than more so than they used to be. Now, a lot of people there's a lot of videos going around at the moment stating, well, basically one of the reasons that the COVID-19 pandemic is fake is because hospitals are almost empty. And well, that's true, but it's not because the virus is fake. And the virus there is a real virus, and I think this is where I have found myself at odds with a lot of the conspiracy, because I happen to believe there's a real virus. It's just that It's just that the whole lockdown. It's true the lockdown thing that Mark Devlin's complaining about is absolutely correct. It's true that the government are taking advantage of the lockdown, totally and utterly. But so some action to protect people from this virus is necessary. It's just the government are basically using it just to bring in their Orwellian super state. So kind of like so I'm kind of on the bridge being shot at from both sides, because according to the mainstream I'm still a loony. I'm still a nut job, obviously. But the thing about hospitals is at the moment is basically, from my contacts on the inside, they tell me that the hospital is very quiet most of the time. The reason is because basically the decks are clear for action. That policy has changed during the pandemic and the lockdown and the healthcare emergency measures as a result. So it's in a state of, the NHS is in a state of emergency. And this involves, for example, that GPs and clinics are not referring patients to acute care like they used to. So when they would normally admit someone to the hospital, they'd like sending them home to wait or to be treated in the community. At the same time, people are attending A&E less. They're choosing not to go to A&E as much as they used to. Those who would normally, if they phone like a helpline, like the NHS Direct helpline, are being told, you know, you need to go to A&E. Now the NHS Direct is saying more and more not to go to A&E, and this is simply because of the pandemic and things like that. So I'm trying to eliminate I'm trying to get in the way of the wind, because the wind, it's possible that I might be able to block some of the wind from getting on the microphone, because you'll be getting noise on the mic. So this is why hospitals are quiet at the moment. Of course, there's these temporary Nightingale hospitals that have been built. So far, you know, they haven't been needed in large numbers. I mean, hopefully, maybe they can mothball them rather than get rid of them. I don't know what the plan is. But I'm not going to say any more about the coronavirus, because I cover that in detail in several HPANWO voice articles, 2 HPANWO radio shows. I'll put the link in the description box to one of those HPANWO radio shows. And also my COVID-19 live stream that I did. I did a COVID-19 live stream. But the hospital portering year just gone is not just about... It's not just about the coronavirus. More has happened as well. Rutger Hauer died. Now, Rutger Hauer, the actor, he's a Dutch actor, and he has passed away, which is very, very sad. Now, of course, he's best known for playing people like Roy Batty, the Nexus 6 replicant in Blade Runner. That's his most famous role, I think. But he's done a lot of other really great films. He's a great actor. But the second last thing he did was actually featuring in Porters, the TV series Porters. And I have actually done an entire video about that, which I will not link to in the description box. You can find it if you want to look at it. But of course, one of the things that happened last year was the second series of Porters came out. I've done a review of that, which you can find in various places. I must actually say that if you want to know more about the subjects I'm talking about in this particular video, the best thing to do is go to the HPWA blog. That's HPANWO-HPWA.blogspot.co.uk. The reason is because that's the Hospital Porters Welfare Association. It's the blog. I actually have 6 written blogs for those of you who only watch me on HPANWO TV. So you're missing out an awful lot on what I do if you don't read them. But the HPWA covers hospital portering and other related matters there. I put it separate to the others. So Rutger Hauer died soon. He was quite old, actually. He died soon after he finished Porters, which is a great shame. I now will always think of him as Tillman, the crazy old man who is me in 30 years' time in a parallel universe. And I can't think of him as anything other than Tillman. No, that's how I'll always remember him. So Tillman is now on eternal night shift. Rest in peace, my brother reporter in fiction. Yeah, now something else I discovered I want to talk about, and that is to do with, now first of all, I should point out a little bit of things that are slightly different this time, because of course in most of my St Theo's videos I'm wandering about, aren't I? I'm walking around, and the reason is, usually I do these St Theo's videos when I am, in fact I filmed here on previous St Theo's videos, is when I'm actually walking around delivering my St Theo's party invitations. But of course there is no St Theo's party invitations, are there, this year, because of the lockdown. This is why this one's a little bit... There's another reason why this one's a little bit different. So normally I'm delivering my St Theo's lockdown invitation, my St Theo's party's invitations. I can take them around all the hospitals. And guess what? No party today. But anyway, that's why I'm here. But I'm as close to a hospital as I can get, like I said. Anyway, Eleanor Roosevelt. I found out a bit more about her. Now, the thing about it, Eleanor Roosevelt was someone I hadn't even looked into. All I knew is that she uttered the famous phrase, "Nobody can make you feel inferior without your consent." She uttered that phrase. Now, that of course has become the motto of St Theo's Day. I think it's very appropriate for hospital porters, and so I always put it on all the invitations to my St Theo's Day parties. I always do. I put them on the invitations so that people can read that and hopefully get inspired by it. But who was Eleanor Roosevelt? Who was? Well, she is actually she's actually the First Lady of the United States, and she actually was the. Again, I've got some notes here, but if you want to read more about this, go to the HPWA blog where I've done a whole article about her. She was the wife of the 32nd President of the United States, who was called Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, despite their names, her maiden name was actually Roosevelt, as well as her married name, because they were related. They were part of a family called the Roosevelt family. They were like a Dutch kind of, it was like a Dutch aristocratic line that was popular in the United States. And so they were, I think, fourth cousins or something like that. And they both happened to be called Roosevelt. And so when they married, she just, in those days women always changed their names, their surnames. She just kept calling herself Roosevelt. Though knowing her, she might be one of the pioneers of women who kept their maiden names, because she was a first wave feminist. There's no doubt about it. She studied under a famous French feminist who was quite well known at that time, and she's rumoured to have had several homosexual relationships with various people, including a famous journalist and Amelia Earhart, the famous aviator, pilot. But you know, the thing about it is, Franklin Roosevelt, he was a bit of a player as well. He was the Bill Clinton of his time. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander, as far as I'm concerned, you know, so you can't really blame her, I suppose, in those circumstances. But she was supposedly, it's interesting about her is that she was involved in many liberal movements at that time. She was involved in the black civil rights movement and things like that. Which is all well and good. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't think black people should have to sit at the back of buses or anything like that. But of course, just as today, back then, of course, it was corrupted and perverted by the cultural Marxists and by the New World Order people. Very, very much so. Very much so. And she was actually accused of being a Soviet agent. I mean, I know that in those days, for example, I think she was nominated, she was mentioned on the House Un-American Activities list. I don't know if she was ever interviewed, but the House Un-American Activities was something that was convened in the late 1940s to investigate possible communists in the American system. Now, the word communist in those days didn't mean what you'll read in the dictionary definition. In those days, you didn't have to be a orthodox Marxist. You could just be anyone who wasn't a table-thumping redneck. And indeed, some very famous people, especially in Hollywood. I mean, you heard of the Hollywood 10? A lot of quite famous people were accused of communism, or communist activities. They were hauled up and asked if they were a member of the Communist Party, and some of them said no, something like that. Others refused. They refused to answer because they believed it was unconstitutional because of the rules to do with freedom of speech, things like that, and basically privacy. And so they just refused to answer. I mean, people such as Paul Robeson, the singer. Now Paul Robeson is like a wonderful bass baritone voice, black guy, American, Very, very popular in Wales. He went all over Wales singing with choirs. Learned to speak very good Welsh. Sung all kinds of the various songs we have in Wales. Oh, wonderful, wonderful voice he had. There was also Arthur Miller, Humphrey Bogart, Lionel Stander. These people were like household names in those days in the United States, because they were actors, they were writers, they were Hollywood producers and things like that. And there was basically this Red Scare. Now, it turns out, I mean, I don't support the idea that you should be forced in front of a committee and say whether you're a member of a party or not, regardless of what that party is, because freedom of belief, I mean, this is one of the foundational principles of the United States. However, there's been some vindication for some of the paranoia, which maybe is understandable with the nuclear bomb. Even the very man whose name is synonymous with institutional paranoia, Senator Joseph McCarthy, has, with retrospect, kind of been proved right. Now, Stefan Molyneux did an entire talk about this, which is over 2 hours long, about what he discovered about how the Soviet Union was infiltrating the West with its spies. And I'll say more about this in a future video. Indeed, I have done in the one about George Blake, because when this lockdown's over, I'm going to carry on with my spying series. But the Venona decrypts, some of them have still never been decoded, but they revealed the names of the Donald McLean, the famous spy, which when he was actually exposed, the other two others, or in the end 3 others, that is Anthony Blunt, Kim Philby and Guy Burgess, were also revealed. Guy Burgess actually fled to the Soviet Union with McLean, and 11 years later Kim Philby was exposed and escaped, or was allowed to escape to avoid a public scandal. We don't know, but I'll say more about that in a future video. So there's some justification for people being on edge about these sorts of things. Now, Eleanor Roosevelt was apparently one of these people accused of being a communist. So were other people. I mean, Robert Oppenheimer, who built the bomb, he was accused. Things like that. It was like almost everyone could be a communist in those days. You know, it's like, as I said, being a communist doesn't mean you have to like wave a red flag. You just have to be, like I said, say things like, well, maybe black people shouldn't sit at the back of buses. So now G. Edward Griffin has done a documentary. There's several documentaries about Roosevelt. G. Edward Griffin did a long documentary about her, which I've watched, and he's very much concerned that she was like a New World Order hack, and she was put in there basically to manipulate FDR, and so he became very internationalist and things like that. But really, when I think about it, though, what matters here is what she said. Now, I know that people sometimes, bad people take the right line, as Christopher Hitchens used to say. The wrong people take the right line, or the right people take the wrong line. But Winston Churchill, for example, he was another sort of globalist, a genocidal maniac, but he said something which I quoted in one of my Larry Warren articles. So you have enemies. Good. That means you've stood for something in your life. And of course, Roosevelt said, Eleanor Roosevelt, whoever she was, I don't care if she was the high priestess of the Illuminati. She said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Now that, as a former hospital porter, that strikes a bell with me, and hope it does with you. So whoever she was, I don't care, like I said. She said those words of wisdom, and I'm going to continue using those words on my literature related to St Theo's. So all my invitations and all my things I send out, it's all going to have that on it. Now, how are you getting on with the dignity statements? Now, I'm primarily addressing hospital porters here, but not only. I mean, maybe you may be a civilian, or you may just be able to use this in your own personal. Dignity statements are something new, not exclusive to hospital porters. They can be used by anyone at any time in any situation, social or professional. So, again, there's lots of background in the HPWA blog. I think I'll just put why don't I just put a link to the HPWA blog to the homepage, and then you can look for yourself. But the dignity statement thing it's come to a head again this particular year. I've done some great dignity statements various times, and it's got me thinking about things, and thinking about how you can apply the dignity statement in your period of service, because you don't have to copy me. What's right for you will depend on you, your personality, and on the hospital you serve at, and the culture of your department, and things like that. So you don't just copy me. When you go onto the wards, you don't have to copy what I do when I describe my dignity statements. You can make up some of your own. It can also depend on who you're addressing, of course, definitely. But there's some resources in Hollywood you might be interested in, which I've particularly found very useful. Now, one of those is a film called Matilda. Now, this came out in the 90s. It's based on the Roald Dahl story, a children's story about a young girl who finds out she has supernatural powers. She's magical. And indeed she is magical, but her best magic is actually of the non-supernatural variety. Just checking now. Is there too much wind? I hope there's not too much wind on the mic. I'll keep my voice raised anyway. She said, for example, what happens if you're familiar with the story, is Matilda attends a school which has a teacher who's really horrible, Miss Trunchbull, who's brought viciously to life by Pam Ferris. It's a brilliant performance by that actress, actually, playing Miss Trunchbull. Miss Trunchbull is sadistic and cruel. She's a real bully of a teacher. At one point, she catches one of Matilda's classmates in the kitchen eating chocolate cake, stealing chocolate cake from the kitchen. Now, he's a beast boy. He obviously likes his cake and things like that. And so to punish him, she gets all the school into the hall for assembly, and she makes Bruce sit on the stage, and she says, right, Bruce, she orders him to consume the rest of the chocolate cake, hoping that he will... The point of it is to humiliate him by making him eat so much of it he's sick. That's the point. The point is to humiliate him, because she's a bully. What happens is Matilda suddenly starts cheering him on as he's eating this cake, and then the other kids do, and they all start cheering for him. Come on, Bruce, you can do it, and things like that. And Trunchbull is there shouting, stop, 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 but they keep shouting, come on, Bruce, you can do it, come on, Brucey, come on. And Bruce, he keeps eating and eating, and in the end he eats all the cake, and he holds the plate above his head in triumph, and the children are cheering and cheering and cheering. Now, this is the essence of the dignity statement. It's about making your aggressors' attacks against you, humiliation, backfire on them without you initiating your own attack, which you can't do in a professional situation. That is the essence of the dignity statement. It's getting windy. I'll try to keep my voice up. I'm hoping to be blocking the wind on the mic with my own self. And so this is what they did in that film, in Matilda and her classmates. This humiliation was meant to humiliate Bruce and terrorise them. She turned on its head. She completely disarmed Miss Trunchbull and reversed that humiliation into an act of dignity, a statement of dignity, a dignity statement. And that is that's a brilliant example from Hollywood of what I mean by a dignity statement. It's a wonderful scene. It's very moving. It's a wonderful, wonderful scene in that film. If you've never seen it, please do go out and watch it. Hopefully you'll get some inspiration from it. You find that scene on YouTube. Now, there's another film I saw once. I can't find the clip of this, but it's another one which is very, very similar. And it is it's called Bopha, B-O-P-H-A. It's a film. It's directed by Morgan Freeman, incidentally, because rather directional curiosity there, because he's best known as an actor, but he actually directed this one. And and it stars Danny Glover. It's set in South Africa towards the end of the apartheid era in the 80s. And Danny Glover plays this chief of police, who's also a trainer. He trains the new recruits into the South African police force. And to be a policeman in South Africa in those days was very difficult. I mean, you'd be attacked and things like that, and a lot of police were lynched and things like that. And Danny Glover is like training the new recruits. Now, what they do is there's a word which is an insulting word for a policeman, which is pig. And indeed, it's the same in this country. If you're calling a policeman a pig, it's a rude word for a policeman to call him a pig. And it's the same in South Africa. And so Danny Glover is standing in front of these new recruits at the training centre, of the police training centre, and he says to you, he says, "When you are out on the streets, they call you pig. Pig, they shout at you, pig, you filthy pig." Again and again they call you pig. They shout at you and they call you pig. "But there is something they don't know, which I'm going to tell you right now," he says. "The word pig is an acronym." And he starts writing on a blackboard behind him, P-I-G, in a column. And he says, "Do you know what pig stands for? Pride, intelligence, and guts." The film, you can watch it, it's available if you want to buy it, but the clip's not available. But that clip, I never forgot that, because I was actually in hospital portering when I saw that. And it's another example of a dignity statement where an act of humiliation is reversed and turned into a statement of pride. You realise what these people are doing by saying that the word pig obviously stands for pride, intelligence, guts. It disarms your antagonist. And that's the whole purpose of the dignity statement. I've done other videos on that. I'll just check out the HPWA blog. Oh, brilliant. Pride, intelligence, guts. Never forget that. Now, Niall Murphy, Mr. Opaque Lens. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's my friend of mine, makes videos like mine. Used to do something called Shamanic Freedom Radio. He's started producing YouTube videos, and one of them's very interesting because he brings up the subject of the NHS. Now, just to give you a bit of background, when I started out in hospital portering, I was very young. I was 18 years old. I was naive, I was idealistic, I was stupid, basically. I was like many people of that age. And I got into trade unionism. I was actually much more left-wing in those days than I am now. I got into trade unionism. And I believed wholeheartedly in the essence, which is really still the basis of trade unionism today: public good, private bad. That's simple. And so and to be honest, there's some justification for this based on my experience, because I saw bits of the NHS being just cut off and privatised, given out to private companies. And I thought to myself, you know, that's an awful thing. It's ruining the NHS. And I was totally of the belief that the solution, which is still the solution according to most trade unionists and left-wingers nowadays, is renationalise, improve funding, and that's what you really need to do. The NHS was a perfect institution, but before they started bringing in private companies. But it's not that simple, and I found out more recently it's actually not that simple. The state bureaucracies are far from perfect. Far from perfect. They are mechanical, soulless and grim, to quote Niall. And I, over time, has begun to wonder if just total renationalisation is the answer to the NHS's problems. Now, but you know, people say you've been watching too much Stefan Molyneux, Ben. You've been reading Ayn Rand and things like that. Yes, I have, and it has changed my perspective. It has. This does not mean I support what was done to the NHS. What happened with the NHS is that it started under Margaret Thatcher, but it was continued under the other government, Major, and then Blair. Everyone thought when Labour would get in, they'd reverse it. They didn't. They accelerated it. In fact, the biggest privatisation operation, that's the PFI initiative, using companies like Carillion, that infamous Carillion, you know, the biggest company in the world you've never heard of, but then it got into the news and everyone heard of it. That was done under a Labour government. Now, the thing about it is, like, the supporters of privatisation say it improves quality because different companies have to compete to provide the best service, rather than just having a state with a bureaucracy in which just they get money no matter what. I brought this subject up, I think, on last year's St Theo's Day video, that the NHS basically is a massive, great big parasitic monster, and the people like me are just a part of it, and which maybe explain why some of the porters weren't the most proficient in the world, because why be good at your job when, if at very, very best, you'll be treated exactly the same as people who are not? Why not just be as crap as they are? Be as lazy and incompetent as you can get away with? At worst, I mean, you'll be treated as much, much worse if you're good at your job, because it's for reasons I'm not entirely sure, in state institutions, both management and your fellow staff resent someone who's good at their job. They do. So, what about the various companies? I mean, for 10 years I was employed by a company called ISS Mediclean, and the whole service degenerated. And then we were in-house for a few years, and then it was back to Carillion, back to private. Well, I wasn't actually employed by Carillion, I was seconded to them. I was still working for the NHS, but they brought in this company to run the whole thing. They brought in the company based to provide management. That's when they got rid of me. But, you know, the thing about it is the supporters will say, well, that competition, that healthy competition improves quality. The thing is that these contractors don't actually compete with each other. That's the thing. So the contractor can run as crappy a service as the state does, because they don't have to compete with anyone. The reason is because there's supposed to be a competition in which they get a tender. They submit a tender to a state institution, and the company then chooses the best one. And that's the competition, but it doesn't work that way. It works through corruption. When ISS Mediclean took over the porters, we knew what was going to happen, because the existing ISS manager, the one who ran the domestics, for some reason she was always hanging around with the hotel services manager. We noticed that. They was like sitting with each other in the canteen and things like that, and we thought, it's a bit of a foregone conclusion, isn't it? And indeed it was. Indeed it was. Mediclean got the contract. So this tendering is just for show. The real deal is done through corruption. It's done through backhanders. It turned out that hotel services manager got a finder's fee from the company, and so that they were given the contract. And in a state bureaucracy, it's the worst of both worlds. It's the perfect storm. You have a company that's only interested in short-term profits, that is going to cream off as much of its fees as it can and do as shitty a job as it possibly can get away with. And you have a state bureaucracy which is completely unaccountable. That's so... And the service degenerated. It only ended when there was a massive public scandal to do with hygiene, levels of hygiene and quality of service within the hospitals. The thing is, I could have told them that. We did try to tell them that, because we saw it happening from the inside, and no one listened to us. And the trade unionists and the left wingers who say, well, that's capitalism for you. It's not capitalism. It's corporate state feudalism. It's what Stefan Molyneux calls crapitalism. I don't have all the answers at this point. I'm still just exploring this. It's a new idea to me that I've been thinking about for a while. Niall's video brought it back up again. I didn't get the idea from him, but his video sort of like reignited this question in my mind. So I haven't got all the answers now, but this idea that simply renationalise and fund and everything will be fine, I don't think that's a solution anymore. And I'm sure my former trade union comrades will despise me for that, but well, this is why I left. This is why I got out of it. Because I'm not compatible with you people anymore. These people, I'm addressing them now. You know, we don't have, you know, my opinions are not compatible with your ideological agenda. So this is where we are. June the 1st. A new hospital portering year begins, an old one ends. No St Theo celebrations apart from this little private one I'm doing now. And for you guys who are watching, on this beautiful day, it's a lovely, lovely day today, on this beautiful, beautiful spring that we've had here. Well, within the hospitals, things go along as always, minus a few brave individuals who are no longer with us. Not just the porters, but the nurses, doctors, health visitors, many, many others who've also lost their lives as a result of this pandemic. And many, many other things. I mean, this clap for, you know, the clap for carers thing, right, I couldn't help being carried along with it because we've been so unappreciated for so long, and then suddenly we start getting public appreciation. I must admit, it is intoxicating. It is intoxicating. But really, I mean, it's only made, all it's done is make people aware of a situation that already exists. That is, people in healthcare professions are very, very vulnerable to all kinds of problems, both physical and mental health problems. I mean, the number of porters and nurses and other people, the number of funerals I went to of porters who died in their 40s and their 50s, unbelievable. Me being out of it has probably added a few years to my life expectancy. I hope so, anyway. Whether it actually does or not, only time will tell, but fact of the matter is, being a healthcare provider is bad for your health. And so I do hope at the end of this pandemic, people will bear that in their mind, and people will bear that in mind and continue to support and respect and admire the healthcare professions, both hospital portering and civilian. Because I think we deserve it. And that's a good thing that's happened this year, I think. This is one of the silver linings to this whole coronavirus mess. Well, I don't know what you're doing for St Theo's Day. I'm going to have a few drinks, which is the traditional hospital portering thing. So do have a beer or a glass of whatever you like for me. And when you do, raise your glass and say to yourself, this is for the hospital porters. Cheers. That's the best way to do. You know, seeing as you can't actually go out and do anything, that I ask you to do in your own homes while you're socially isolating. Even if you're completely alone, just do that. Just do this. Do it now while you're watching this video. Come on, guys. Cheers. Come on. And who knows? There will be a party soon, I know that. I'm in touch with some people on the inside of my old hospital, and we're arranging something for as soon as the lockdown is over. But in the meantime, this very hot and sunny, but rather slightly anticlimactic St Theo's Day today, I think. June the 1st, 2020. But it's been one which I am going to mark regardless. And I hope you've enjoyed watching it. So all you hospital porters out there, pride and dignity, brother and sister porters. And for all the rest of you, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you have a good St Theo's Day, and until the next video, I wish you well. Hospital porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. And I must admit, I was stunned by his response, and I shouldn't have been, because I've got enough experience to know how people generally react to this sort of thing. But there we were, sitting eating a meal, and they asked me for my opinion. I gave it to them. Was I supposed to lie? And I said to him, hey, look, mate, do you know something? If I stole your car, you'd be less angry with me than you are right now. And the thing about these porters is they don't want to know there's a way out. This particular kind of porter, not all porters. Hashtag not all porters. What they want is for you to say to them, there is no such thing as porter's pride and dignity. You have to live without it because there is no other way. You show them another way and they get angry.